In this video, we're going to add style to create a horizontal nav bar. So right now what we have is an unordered list, and the way that this looks in the code is simply inside our nav element, we have a UL element, and inside that there are LIs that have local links. So each LI contains a single local link. All right, so there's some changes that we want to make it look. First off, notice that it's floating up next to this floating image, and I want to stop that from floating. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to set my nav element. I come down here under the header. I just like to keep things in order. Nav element, and I'm going to set the clear property. And I'm going to clear it on both sides because I don't want it to float next to anything, and that clear property stops it from floating, and that puts it down there. Now I'm going to make some general changes to the list. Lists come by default with a set amount of padding and a set amount of margin, and these vary depending on the browser. So I'm going to get rid of all of that so I don't have to worry about it looking different on one browser than another, and then I can set these to whatever I want. The other thing, notice how this will move the list, so it gets rid of that margin or padding that's on the left of it and the top of it. And the next thing I want to do is get rid of the style. So I'm going to set the list style to none, and what this will do is to remove those bullets that are standard on an unordered list. Okay, now I've got the basics of what I want, but now I want it to go horizontal. Lists go one after another on top of each other, and I don't want it to be that way. So it's important to get it to go horizontal. I've got to do that to the LI. Oh, wait a minute here. On that UL, I did it to all the ULs, and that may not work because I might have ULs in other places on the page that I don't want to do that with, or on the site. So I want to make sure that I specify this is the one inside the nav element. I want to do the same with the LI. So inside the nav element, any IL element, I want to set the display to inline. And you might want to do inline block. You have more flexibility with inline block. You can set width and stuff. So either inline or inline block is what you want to set that to. So I refresh, and there, notice what I've got. I have a horizontal nav. And that's what we wanted to do, was create a horizontal nav bar. Now what we can do is simply add style. Once we have these basics set, these basic things set, now we really just add the style that we want to make it look the way we want it to look. Right now it just looks like links because it has the styling for A tags. So now we can do all kinds of things that we want to do, and we're going to set these on the A element. All right, that's the one that we want to use. There's the A element. So let me put a border around it so we can see what that is. I'll just do a 2-pixel border, and I'll make it solid and make it a color up here. This will actually look pretty close to black, but it won't actually be black, so it keeps us in our styles. All right, so there I have borders, and now what we see is how small A tags are. Right, and so they don't look good at that size. So what we want to do is we want to add some size to these nav buttons. And one way to do that is with padding. So if I go ahead and add some padding, and let's say that I want, oh, I don't know, let's go ahead and put 8 pixels on top and bottom and 12 pixels on left and right. And refresh that. And there I've made those buttons bigger. Now see how they have spilled over? So the padding has gone outside of the nav bar. So one of the ways, the way to fix this is to establish these A elements as block elements. So I'm going to change the display to block on the A elements, and this will help us give us more manipulation that we can do with these and lines them up where we want them. Okay, now notice there's a bit of margin between them. So if I want to keep that, I can. If I want to make it bigger, I can. And I can say margin right. Let's just do the one on the right because I want to stay left, and say we want this to be bigger. then I get space between the buttons. And maybe that's what you want, maybe that's not. Maybe you want to get rid of all of the space. So let's go ahead and set the margin to 0 and see what we get. There, it got smaller. Let's go ahead and set the margin left to. Now notice we're setting this on the A text, just the ones that are in the nav. And notice how I still can't quite get them together. So this is a time when if you want to get rid of all that space, you're actually going to have to use a negative margin. So if I set the margin right a little bit, there we go, and I do the same thing with the margin left. Then I can actually get rid of that margin, but I had to use a negative margin to do it. Now there's just lots of different things you can do with style. So one of the things I can do is put a border radius on it. And I don't want the left, it starts at the top left to be any, but I want it on the right. I'll do 12 pixels there and none on the bottom. So I just put this will just put a radius on that top right, if you like that. If you like it on all of them, you can put it all 4 by leaving it blank like that. You can, I'm going to go back to this one. You can change on hover. So you can say, well, instead of just changing the text, what I want to do is change the background. So again, nav A, and I'm going to do it only when it hovers. And I'm going to set the background color. And here I'll go up and get a color that we can lighten that with. And when I hover, it lightens them so it's really visible where we are. So lots of things that you can do to make this a horizontal nav. Once you get it horizontal, then you can add any style that you want to make it decorated the way that you like. So let's go ahead and make a few changes that we want. So this, notice how this nav bar doesn't go all the way across. So how about if we wanted to center this in there? So what we're doing here is we're centering the UL. And the way that we can do that, remember it has to have a specific width and it has to have margin left and right the same. And one more thing, what's that? Oh yeah, it needs to be a block element, and ULs are already that way. So to do this, I need to give it a certain width. So I say how wide I want this to be, and this will be interesting to see how wide we want it. And then the margin will have to be auto instead of 0. So there, and that moves it then to the center. And let's say that we don't want individual borders around them. Let's go ahead and say, let's put the border around the UL itself. And I didn't mean to move the radius, I meant to move the border. And there we're getting an entirely different look. So really we can just keep playing and say, well, you know what, I really want it to span the whole thing, and I know the body is 820 pixels, so let's just make it the whole width. And there it is. And then inside here, let's go ahead and center. Okay, so now we've got them centered, and here we have the links across with just very little happening when we hover over them, and they just lay there nicely. Want to make them a little bit wider, we can. Or different colors, or different font, or different background colors. Lots of things. Just you can play with it all you want to get the kind of nav you want to have. And you can just keep looking around until you find something you want, and then you can put it on your website to make your own brand for your web portfolio. And a really nice advantage is that I have used the same style sheet on every page in the website. That means that each of these pages in the website are linked to the same CSS file. So when I set that style on the navigation, it was applied to each page, and now they all have the same navigation.